In just a few short years, the cost of living in the UK will explode, and it's about to get much worse. By 2025, everyday essentials will become so expensive that even middle-class families will struggle to get by. Imagine paying double for energy bills, while wages stay the same. Housing prices are already sky high, and experts say they're only going higher, pushing the dream of home ownership further out of reach. But it's not just your rent that's increasing. Groceries, fuel, even healthcare will cost you more than ever. And with tax hikes looming, it's going to be even harder to stretch your paycheck. The worst part? The government has few answers, and the pressure on families is about to reach unthinkable levels. What's causing this crisis? And what can you do to survive? You'll want to stick around for the shocking truth behind the UK's future. Number 1. Rising energy prices. Energy prices in the UK have surged in recent years, and the outlook for 2025 is even more concerning. The shift towards renewable energy has created new challenges, particularly as the country moves away from cheaper fossil fuels. The demand for renewable energy sources, such as wind and solar power, is increasing, but their capacity to meet the country's energy needs remains inconsistent, often leading to higher costs. Coupled with the ongoing global energy crisis, driven by geopolitical instability and supply chain disruptions, UK households can expect to see even higher energy bills in 2025. Natural gas prices, which play a key role in heating homes, are particularly volatile. The UK's dependency on imported gas means that global fluctuations directly affect domestic costs. While domestic production is available, it's not sufficient to meet the UK's growing needs, which exacerbates the price hikes. Electricity bills are also climbing, with energy companies passing on the increasing costs of wholesale energy to consumers. This makes heating and electricity consumption unaffordable for many people, particularly for those on fixed incomes or lower wages. Government initiatives to tackle rising energy prices are often limited and slow-moving. With future energy price caps likely to be lifted, many households will struggle to cope with mounting energy costs. Furthermore, the increase in energy usage due to remote work and home-based lifestyles post-pandemic has further stretched resources. Energy efficiency upgrades, such as better insulation and the use of energy-efficient appliances, can mitigate some of the damage, but these are costly for many families to implement. As energy costs continue to rise, budgeting for energy consumption becomes critical. Exploring ways to cut down on unnecessary energy usage, like turning off unused devices or investing in more energy-efficient solutions, will help reduce the financial strain caused by the escalating energy crisis. Number 2. Inflation and economic instability. The UK is facing a persistent inflation crisis that's drastically affecting the cost of living. Over the past few years, inflation rates have reached levels not seen in decades, driven by a combination of global supply chain disruptions, the aftermath of the pandemic, and ongoing geopolitical tensions. With inflation expected to remain high through 2025, the purchasing power of UK households will continue to shrink, making everyday goods and services much more expensive. One of the primary contributors to this inflation is the cost of raw materials, which has risen sharply due to supply chain challenges. As factories worldwide struggle to reopen post-pandemic, demand outpaced supply, causing prices of goods to increase. Everything from food to electronics to raw materials for housing has become more expensive, and these higher costs inevitably trickle down to consumers. Additionally, economic instability stemming from factors such as Brexit's aftermath and the global energy crisis is further exacerbating inflation. As businesses face higher operational costs, they are forced to pass on these expenses to consumers, making daily essentials significantly more expensive. The Bank of England may struggle to control inflation through interest rate hikes, especially as wage growth fails to keep pace with rising costs. For many households, the impact of inflation will be seen in the form of higher grocery bills, more expensive fuel, and increased costs for healthcare, education, and transportation. As wages stagnate, this creates a cycle where people's earnings are not enough to cover their basic needs. To manage this, consumers will need to be more strategic with their budgets. focusing on cutting back on non-essentials and looking for ways to stretch every pound. With inflationary pressures continuing, 2025 could see an even harsher reality for families across the UK, with fewer resources and an increased financial burden. Number 3. Housing crisis. The UK housing crisis has been escalating for years, and by 2025, it is expected to reach even more alarming levels. The lack of affordable housing options, both for purchasing homes and renting, has left many people struggling to find suitable accommodation. In particular, house prices in cities like London, Manchester, and Birmingham have skyrocketed, making it nearly impossible for many individuals, especially younger people and first-time buyers, to step onto the property ladder. Even those in more rural areas are feeling the strain, as demand outpaces supply. The problem isn't just the high cost of homes, it's the shortage of housing itself. The construction of new homes has not kept up with the demand, leaving many households unable to find properties within their budget. Renting has also become an increasingly expensive option, with rental prices rising faster than wages. This leaves renters with limited options, often being forced to settle for homes that don't meet their needs or expectations. Additionally, the mortgage market is tightening, with interest rates rising and lenders becoming more cautious. Securing a mortgage has become a difficult task for many potential homeowners. Those who do manage to buy are faced with high monthly repayments, which further stretches their budgets. Renters are similarly impacted by the skyrocketing costs of rent, with many forced to live in overcrowded or subpar conditions. The government has made attempts to address this issue, but the solutions have largely been insufficient, leaving many families and individuals without affordable housing options. As demand for housing continues to outstrip supply, it is expected that housing costs will continue to climb in 2025, further exacerbating the financial pressure on the average household. For those struggling with housing affordability, alternative living arrangements, such as shared housing or moving to less expensive areas, may become necessary. Number 4. Stagnant wages for soaring costs. In the UK, wage growth has largely failed to keep up with the sharp rise in living costs over the past decade. While inflation has soared, wages have remained relatively stagnant, leaving many working people struggling to make ends meet. By 2025, this imbalance is expected to worsen, making it increasingly difficult for families to afford basic necessities such as food, transportation, and housing. The gap between wages and inflation means that people are, in effect, earning less in real terms. For example, essential goods like groceries and fuel have seen price hikes far outstripping any wage increases. This has resulted in the average household's purchasing power shrinking, making it harder to maintain a decent standard of living. Even though minimum wage rates may rise slightly over time, they will likely remain below the cost of living in many regions, especially in larger cities like London, where both housing and transportation costs are sky high. Moreover, certain industries, particularly those reliant on low-wage workers, such as retail and hospitality, will likely continue to offer minimal pay increases. This creates a larger divide between higher income earners and those in lower paying sectors, contributing to a wider wealth gap in society. Many people in the UK will also face challenges in securing career advancement or promotions, as companies may struggle to absorb rising operational costs and keep salaries competitive. This lack of upward mobility only deepens the financial stress for households, especially when costs across all sectors are rising at an accelerated pace. As wages remain stagnant, more individuals may need to seek additional income streams, such as side jobs or freelance work, just to survive financially. However, these solutions won't be enough for everyone, and in 2025, many will still find themselves living paycheck to paycheck, despite their best efforts to increase their earning potential. Number 5. Tax hikes. The UK government is likely to implement higher taxes in the coming years to address the growing national debt, and 2025 could see significant increases. This will affect individuals and businesses alike, with many feeling the pressure of rising taxes on their everyday finances. The most noticeable impact will be on income tax and national insurance contributions, which are both expected to rise, reducing the amount of disposable income available to UK households. Higher tax rates mean that more of people's wages will go towards funding government services, leaving less for basic needs such as food, rent, and utilities. For those already struggling with the rising cost of living, additional tax burdens could prove crippling. Those in the middle class and working class families are expected to feel the brunt of these tax increases, while higher income earners may have more ways to minimise their tax liabilities. In addition to income taxes, the government is likely to raise corporate taxes, which could affect the prices consumers pay for goods and services. Businesses, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, may be forced to pass on the increased cost to customers in the form of higher prices. This would further inflate the already rising cost of living. Additionally, VAT rates might also rise, impacting everyday items like food, clothing, and entertainment, and further squeezing household budgets. For the self-employed and those running small businesses, tax increases could also impact their profitability and long-term financial planning. With fewer tax relief options available, many will find it harder to save or reinvest into their businesses. As the cost of living continues to climb, tax hikes will put further strain on households and individuals, forcing them to rethink their spending habits and future financial planning strategies. For many, 2025 may usher in an era where tax increases are felt in every aspect of daily life. Budgeting carefully and seeking financial advice on tax efficiency will become even more important to navigate this challenging landscape. Number 6. Supply chain disruptions. The impact of global supply chain disruptions continues to ripple through economies worldwide, and the UK is no exception. In 2025, these disruptions are expected to persist, driving up the cost of goods and services across the country. From raw materials to finished products, the ongoing challenges in international logistics, production delays, and labour shortages are causing significant price increases. One of the primary issues is the shortage of goods, especially in industries like electronics, automotive, and construction. The UK, like many other countries, relies heavily on imports for many of its essential products. And when global supply chains are interrupted, those goods become more expensive. In particular, food prices will likely remain volatile due to disruptions in agricultural supply chains, which impact everything from fresh produce to packaged goods. Another factor contributing to these rising prices is the lack of workers in key sectors, such as transportation and manufacturing. With fewer workers available to produce and transport goods, companies are forced to pay higher wages or rely on slower, more expensive methods of production and shipping. These costs are inevitably passed down to consumers, driving prices up even further. Moreover, shipping delays and container shortages remain common problems in the global shipping industry. Even if the product is available, delays in transportation mean that goods arrive later and at a higher cost. This increases both the price of imports and the price of domestic goods that rely on international components. As supply chain disruptions continue into 2025, the effects will be felt across every aspect of life, from higher grocery bills to expensive construction projects and longer wait times for goods. Households will need to adapt by becoming more resourceful and possibly seeking alternative solutions to mitigate the financial impact of disrupted supply chains, such as buying locally produced goods or reducing unnecessary consumption. Number 7. Transportation costs. Transportation costs in the UK are set to rise dramatically by 2025, putting an additional strain on household budgets. Fuel prices, which have been volatile in recent years, are expected to continue climbing due to global oil price fluctuations and the shift toward greener alternatives that come at a higher cost. The transition to electric vehicles, EVs, may alleviate some costs in the long term, but the upfront price of EVs and the infrastructure required for charging remains substantial. In the short term, families and commuters will be hit by higher costs for petrol, diesel, and public transport fares. One of the key drivers of transportation costs is the rise in fuel prices. As the UK moves toward decarbonising its transport sector, it faces challenges in balancing the costs of renewable energy and electricity production, which are typically more expensive than fossil fuels. This could result in higher costs for both drivers and public transport users, as bus and train companies will pass on the increased energy costs to passengers. The price of vehicle insurance is also climbing, partly due to higher accident claims and the increasing cost of vehicle repairs. For car owners, this means that not only will fuel costs rise, but owning a car in the UK will become more expensive in terms of maintenance and insurance premiums. For those relying on public transportation, train and bus fares are likely to see significant increases as operators attempt to cover rising operating costs. With inflation and rising wages feeding into the cost of running transport networks, these hikes will become a regular feature of daily commutes. As transportation costs rise, people will need to consider alternative commuting options such as cycling, walking, or using car-sharing services. Additionally, many may start to explore remote working as a way to reduce travel expenses, especially if employers allow flexible working arrangements to cut commuting costs. Number 8. Food prices and agricultural costs. By 2025, food prices in the UK are expected to continue their upward trend, fueled by a variety of factors that are challenging both food production and supply chains. The rise in agricultural costs, driven by global events, labour shortages, and climate-related challenges, means that UK consumers will pay more for basic necessities like bread, meat, and vegetables. The combination of rising input costs and unpredictable weather patterns makes it difficult for producers to stabilise prices, resulting in higher costs for consumers. Labour shortages in the agricultural sector, exacerbated by Brexit and the pandemic, are another key factor. With fewer workers available to harvest crops, manage farms, and process food, producers are forced to pay more for labour, which in turn drives up the cost of production. This is particularly felt in sectors like fruit and vegetable farming, where manual labour is essential, and farmers are increasingly relying on expensive, temporary labour. In addition to labour costs, the UK is dealing with disruptions in the global food supply chain. As shipping costs rise and trade barriers emerge, imported food items are becoming more expensive. The cost of transporting food from overseas suppliers, especially fresh produce, is passed on to consumers. Additionally, UK farmers are facing rising input costs, including fuel, fertilisers, and feed for livestock. As these essential items become pricier, the cost of producing food increases, which ultimately impacts the price at the checkout. Climate change also poses a significant threat to the agriculture industry, leading to unpredictable harvests and damaging weather events. Poor weather conditions can result in lower crop yields, forcing farmers to rely on imported food to meet demand, further driving up prices. As food costs continue to rise, UK households will need to adapt by budgeting more carefully and seeking out cost-effective options. This may include buying seasonal produce, shopping at local markets, or growing their own food to offset rising grocery bills. Number 9. Health and healthcare expenses. Healthcare costs in the UK are set to rise significantly by 2025, putting additional strain on household budgets. The NHS, which has long been a cornerstone of the country's healthcare system, is facing mounting pressures due to increasing demand for services, an ageing population, and staff shortages. While healthcare in the UK has traditionally been free at the point of service, the rising costs of treatments, medications, and hospital services will likely lead to more financial strain on individuals. The ageing population is one of the primary drivers of increased healthcare expenses. As the number of elderly individuals continues to grow, there will be a higher demand for elderly care, long-term health treatments, and specialist services. This not only increases the cost of care within the NHS, but also puts added pressure on families who may need to care for aging relatives. With more people needing assistance with daily activities and medical care, private care options may become a necessity for some families, which can significantly increase costs. Furthermore, the rising price of medications and medical equipment is contributing to higher overall healthcare costs, as pharmaceutical companies increase prices to offset their own rising production costs. Individuals who require regular prescriptions will face higher out-of-pocket expenses. For those with chronic conditions, the burden of paying for multiple medications can be overwhelming. Another issue is the potential privatization of parts of the healthcare system to alleviate pressure on the NHS. If more services become privatized, patients will be expected to cover a larger portion of their healthcare costs, shifting the financial burden away from the state. To cope with rising healthcare costs, many individuals may have to consider private health insurance or healthcare savings plans. As the NHS continues to face increasing challenges, staying ahead of medical expenses will require careful financial planning and a greater reliance on preventative healthcare measures to minimize the need for expensive treatments down the road. Number 10. Government spending cuts. In the coming years, the UK is likely to face government spending cuts that will affect essential services, further increasing the financial burden on households. With the national debt continuing to rise, the government may look to reduce spending across a range of public services, including education, welfare, transportation, and public infrastructure. These cuts will have a direct impact on the daily lives of UK citizens, making essential services less accessible and more expensive. One of the most significant areas that could face cuts is public welfare, particularly programs that support the most vulnerable members of society. Social security benefits, housing support, and unemployment assistance may be reduced or even frozen, leaving many individuals and families with less financial support in times of need. For those already struggling to make ends meet, the loss of these critical services will further compound their financial hardships. Additionally, education could be another area significantly affected by cuts. School funding may be reduced, leading to larger class sizes, fewer resources for students, and potentially higher costs for parents who may need to pay for extracurricular activities, school supplies, and even basic educational materials. For families already grappling with rising living costs, the additional financial strain of funding their children's education can be overwhelming. Cuts to public transportation could also make commuting more expensive, as fewer routes and services become available. This would particularly affect people who rely on buses, trains, or subways to get to work, school, or appointments. As these government spending cuts take hold, UK residents will need to adjust by becoming more resourceful with their use of public services. This could mean seeking alternative solutions for education, transportation, and healthcare, and looking into community-based initiatives or charitable organisations for additional support. The burden of these cuts will make it even more important for individuals to plan ahead and budget carefully to cope with a more limited range of services in 2025. As we've explored today, the cost of living in the UK is set to reach unthinkable levels by 2025, affecting nearly every aspect of daily life. From soaring energy prices to higher taxes, skyrocketing food costs, and an ever-widening gap between stagnant wages and rising expenses, the future is looking more financially challenging than ever, with so many factors contributing to this looming crisis. It's clear that we must start preparing now for what's coming. The reality is tough, but understanding the problem and taking action early could make all the difference in managing the financial burden. Now we want to hear from you. How do you feel about these predictions? Are you worried about what's ahead? Or do you have a plan to tackle the rising costs? Let us know in the comments below. Your insights might help someone else who's facing the same challenges. If this video opened your eyes to some serious concerns, be sure to check out our previous videos, where we dive deeper into more essential topics that directly impact your life and finances. We truly put a lot of effort into creating valuable content for you, so your support means everything to us. Please hit subscribe. It's just one click, and it helps us continue making these videos that provide you with the information you need. Your subscription helps us keep going and together we can face the challenges ahead. Stay informed, stay prepared, and don't forget to share this video with anyone who might need to hear this.